On today's show, it's a Monday mailbag. We'll talk about the culture the Cavs have inside the locker room, whether or not there could be any more changes to the roster before the season begins, and so much more on today's edition of Locked On Cavs.
You are Locked On Cavs, your daily Cleveland Cavaliers podcast.
Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? My name is Danny Cunningham, and you might know me from my time covering the Cleveland Cavaliers, places like my Substack, The Inside Shot, Cleveland Magazine, 92.3 The Fan, and a number of other stops along the way. I just want to say thank you to you for making Locked On Cavs your first listen today and every day. You can find the show anywhere you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, or anywhere else. Make sure to drop us a 5-star rating, leave us a nice review, and of course, be a friend. Tell a friend about Locked On Cavs. Make sure you're subscribed to the show. Make sure a friend is subscribed to the show as well. And if you're watching on YouTube as we get started, do us a favor. Hit that thumbs up button for us, click subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss the latest Locked On Cavs content. Proud part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNBA, that is LOCKEDONNBA, at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. It is a Monday mailbag edition of the show. We've got plenty of questions to get to, so let's dive right in with the first one coming from Irish Browns fan. Any chance the Cavs make any roster moves before the season starts, or are they counting on a weaker East because of all the injuries to other teams? Feel as if they are still weak in three-point shooting. Well, I would certainly push back on the weak in three-point shooting aspect of things, considering the Cavs were the number 2 three-point shooting team by percentage last year, while still being a pretty high-volume team. Now, that certainly did not translate to the series against the Indiana Pacers, and I think there are a number of different reasons that we could discuss as to why that was, but I don't think that three-point shooting is necessarily the one area that I look at and say, yeah, that's where they really need an upgrade. Because if you look at who they've got playing in their rotation, Darius Garland, fantastic three-point shooter. Donovan Mitchell, really good three-point shooter. Evan Mobley has become a pretty strong three-point shooter. I don't think I'd call him really good, but pretty strong. Max Strus is a very good shooter. Sam Merrill is an excellent shooter. DeAndre Hunter is a very good shooter. They are just loaded with a lot of guys that can really connect from beyond the arc, even if I'm not naming everybody right now. So I don't necessarily look at that as the thing that they need. Now, with that being said, the Cavs will make some sort of roster move before the season begins. So as things currently stand, the Cleveland Cavaliers have 13 guys that are on standard NBA contracts. They also have 2 guys on two-way contracts in Luke Travers and Naquan Tomlin. Those guys do not count against the roster limit. The NBA teams are allowed to have 3 two-way contracts that don't count against the roster limit. They also don't count, I believe, against the salary caps, against luxury tax. Like, none of that matters. So if the Cavs don't fill the third two-way slot right away, that has nothing to do with a financial thing. That is, if they don't fill it right away, that could be, well, we haven't found anybody yet that really makes sense to bring into the program. If that is I think that's a better explanation of why maybe, and I wouldn't expect this. I do think that they will find somebody that comes into camp and earns that third two-way slot, but that's not a financial thing. Now, the other side of things where, as I said, the Cavs have 13 guys on standard deals. The roster limit in the NBA is 15. You can have up to 15 players that are on standard NBA contracts. Now, I would be very surprised if the Cavs begin the regular season after adding 2 more guys. They're at 13 right now. I would anticipate that the Cavs will be at 14 guys on opening night, because that is the way historically that Kobe Altman and this front office like to operate. They like to have a little bit of flexibility with the end of the roster, because and it is a little bit different now because they are in the second apron. It's the reasoning, I suppose, is different because they're in the second apron. Because if you are adding a 15th guy, that is, of course, going to be a much more expensive 15th guy, considering the luxury tax that you would have to pay on whatever, the minimum salary is, even though the full amount, some of it gets subsidized by the NBA, doesn't all count against the tax. But that is something that is certainly an expensive proposition when you're not in the tax, not in the apron system. Like, it doesn't matter as much, but the Cavs have still done things that way, primarily so they can make a 1-for-2 type of trade, right? Like, you think about being able to trade one player, which is what they would have to do this year. If they do make a move, they would have to trade one player and potentially bring back two. If you have 15 guys on the roster, you can't do that. But if you have 14 guys on the roster, that is something that is possible that the Cavs could want to do. Now, with that said, they're at 13, as I mentioned. They will sign somebody to get up to 14. And I think on tomorrow's episode of the show, I'm going to spend much more time talking about what could that end of the roster look like? What does the 14th guy on the Cavs roster look like? Who could it be? Of course, there was a little bit of news about Kevin Love over the weekend and that he's looking for a way out of Utah. As I mentioned, probably about a month ago when that deal went down and he was sent to the Jazz, it's really difficult for me to envision Kevin Love finishing his career if he does want to keep playing, which it sounds like he does. It's really difficult for me to envision Kevin Love being a member of the Utah Jazz. Like, I just don't see that as something that's in the cards. But the Cavs will have to add somebody to the roster. And really the crux of this question, or I guess the biggest part of this question from Irish Browns fan that I find interesting is, are they counting on a weaker East because of all the injuries to other teams? I think that factors into things, certainly, but I do think, and maybe that factors into things more so like from an outsider's perspective, because I do think that the Cavs probably didn't change much about their offseason plan because of the injuries to Jason Tatum and Tyrese Halliburton, and I guess Damian Lillard too. Although even if he was still on the Bucks and healthy, like, the Bucks are just not very good. But I don't think that it's a smart thing to build your roster based upon what other teams are doing. I think that no matter what happened, this after the Cavs were eliminated, or no matter what happened with other teams, I don't think the Cavs offseason would have been very different. I think that would have looked a lot like it did this year. I think that the way they built this team and the moves that they made, primarily trading for Lonzo Ball, signing Larry Nance Jr., I think those are moves that are a result of what happened in the postseason, both to them against the Indiana Pacers and the way the Pacers were able to win, not just the series against the Cavs, but against the Bucks and the New York Knicks as well. And the way that the Oklahoma City Thunder have built their team, where those teams are just filled with guys that are two-way players. The Cavs needed to add a little bit more of that, and I think that they did. So I don't think the rest of the East matters to the Cavs, like exactly what it looks like, because I think that they were always going to be all in for this year. This was always going to be the first year when they made the trade for DeAndre Hunter at the trade deadline last year. That move was one that was, yes, it was something that was helpful for last year because DeAndre Hunter, I think, is a better player than Karis LeVert and Georges Niang, and I think he did make the Cavs better, even if it does take some adjusting. But it was also a move that got them under the tax last year, but pushed them into the second apron this year. That move was always going to be one that was not just about last year. That was a commitment to being in the second apron this year. So I do think that no matter what happened in the postseason, both with the Cavs, with other teams, with injuries across the league, the way I look at it is when the Cavs made that trade, they committed to their roster looking the way that it does right now. Like, the moment that that trade went down, could have said, okay, the Cavs are going to be the second apron next year. They're not going to be able to duck it. They're going to be all in to try and win a championship with what is going to be the most expensive roster in basketball this year. When they traded for DeAndre Hunter, that's exactly what they did. So I don't think that the way they've built their roster has anything to do with the injuries that other teams in the East have sustained. Yes, the East is a little bit weaker. I certainly push back on the notion that it is wide open, and we will talk about that next. But I do look at this and say, okay, the Cavs are going for it this year. I don't think that has anything to do with Boston and Indiana maybe not being as good as they were last year. Now, how weak is the East? How many teams conceivably could win the conference? We'll talk about that next right here on Locked on Cavs. Today's show is brought to you by Monarch Money. Do you ever wish that managing your money felt easier? Well, with Monarch Money, it can. Whether you're growing your savings or planning for a big purchase, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over all of your finances. Monarch Money is more than just a budgeting app. It is a complete financial command center where you can track all your accounts, investments, and spending right in one place. So in addition to managing that cash, you're also building your wealth. Maybe you have a specific category where you just spend a little bit too much. Maybe it's takeout. Maybe you are just every night of the week, you're eating out. You're not cooking at home. You're spending a little bit extra money on food. Monarch can let you know. They'll give you insight into just how much you're spending because it might not realize, you might not feel like it. You might not realize it in real time, but those finances add up. That is not the cheapest thing in the world. Monarch can help you handle that, and they can help you get right back on track to building your wealth. So take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNBA. That is LOCKEDON NBA at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. Again, that is monarchmoney.com. Code LOCKEDONNBA for half off your first year. Thank you again for making Locked On Cavs your first listen today and every day. Like I said earlier, you can find the show anywhere you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, or anywhere else. And TC asks, what team has the biggest chance to win the Eastern Conference outside of the Cavaliers? I think the answer to this question in, just the simplest terms is the New York Knicks. The Knicks obviously went to the conference finals last year. They didn't really change much about their team. They added Jordan Clarkson. They added Yershon Yabusele. I don't know that either of those moves really moved the needle for me personally. I think they might be marginally better. But I also think that the fact that they made the conference finals and fired for the first time in, 25 years, and fired their coach afterwards tells me that they're not really as close as being conference finals. Typically, when you are one of the final four teams in the NBA, which this year was Indiana, New York, Minnesota, and Oklahoma City. Obviously, only one of those teams wins the title, and two of them advance to the finals. But typically, if you are one of the final four teams in the league, you have to be able to look yourselves in the mirror and say, we're pretty close to being champion. I don't think the Knicks could conceivably do that, and that's why I think they fired Tibbs. But I look at this and say, who would, in the Eastern Conference, who would surprise me, or who wouldn't surprise me, I guess is probably a better way to look at it, if they won the East? I would not be surprised whatsoever if the Cavs won the East this year. I don't think anybody should be surprised. They are the odds-on favorite at FanDuel. They've spent most of the offseason in that position. They have the highest win total at FanDuel in the Eastern Conference. You look at this and say, yeah, the Cavs should be a team that if they win the Eastern Conference, nobody should be surprised by it. I also would not be surprised even a little bit if the New York Knicks won the Eastern Conference. I think it's more likely the Cavs win it, and I think that the books are right here. And I actually kind of think that New York's number is a little bit inflated, but I do think that with some of the bigger market teams like the Knicks, like the Celtics, like the Los Angeles Lakers, even the Golden State Warriors at times, I think that their odds can become a little bit inflated, partially because their fan bases are so big and there's a lot of money that comes in on them. So this is a way, in some sense, of the books being able to protect themselves. And I'm not saying that the Knicks shouldn't have the second best odds in the East, because they should, but I just think that number, I think last I checked, it was plus 270. I think that should probably be around plus 330, but that's probably a different conversation for a different day. So the Knicks are the team with the biggest chance, other than the Cavs, to win the East. How many other teams in the East would be surprising if they won, or wouldn't be surprising if they won? I look at it and I say, whether or not you want to put the Cavs and the Knicks in the same tier, which I think is probably the thing that should be done. If you want to put those two teams in the same tier and then look at the rest of the East, well, who's in that next tier? It's probably Orlando. Is Atlanta in that next tier? I'm not so sure. I look at what the Hawks have, and they have a really good roster, and I think they've built their team exactly the way you need to around Trae Young to minimize his deficiencies, certainly on the defensive end of the floor. But I look at it and say, it's really difficult because I think Trae Young is probably somewhere around the 25th best player in basketball. It's really difficult to win at that level with the 25th best player in basketball as your best player, while he is also, not as bad as he once was defensively, but he's still a significant minus on the defensive end of the floor. I look at that and say, okay, well, this is something that I would be surprised if the Hawks are a team that wins the East. I think they'll be better than they were last year. I think they should be a home court advantage team in the first round of the playoffs. Would not be surprised if the Cavs play the Hawks in the second round next year. I don't think that should surprise anybody. They made some really nice additions. Now, I certainly have questions about how often some of those additions, primarily Kristaps Porzingis, going to be able to stay on the floor. But I would be pretty surprised if they won the East. The Orlando Magic, I think I'd be a little bit less surprised if the Magic won the East than if the Hawks won the East, just because I do think that they're more talented, but I still look at them and say, this is not a perfect roster. I think it is a pretty flawed roster still. They don't have, in my opinion, they don't have enough ball handling. And I do think that Paolo Banchero is a budding star, but I think he needs to adjust the way he plays a little bit because he's not the most efficient player in the world. And it's one thing to be an inefficient, really good scorer on a team that's a 5 seed or a 7 seed, the way the Magic have been the last 2 years. But there's a big gap between being that play-in team that's 7 seed and being a team that could conceivably compete for the Eastern Conference title. So I would be surprised if either of those teams won the conference. And then below that, and this is why I don't think the East is as wide open. Like, I'm on teams in my Eastern Conference power ranking, teams 3 and 4. And I'd be pretty surprised if those teams won the conference. After that, you get to Milwaukee, who has the best player in the conference, but the rest of that roster, I do not see where the perimeter creation is going to come from, because if you're counting on Kevin Porter Jr. to do that for 82 games plus the playoffs, I'm sorry, but you're just not going to be a serious contender. I look at Philadelphia. I mean, maybe, but I refuse to believe in Philadelphia until I see Philadelphia actually go on a really deep playoff run. Refuse to believe that. Maybe Joel Embiid will get back to being an MVP and maybe he'll stay healthy. Maybe Paul George will be healthy. I just refuse to believe that that's going to be the case until I actually see it be the case. So I would be very surprised if either of those two teams ended up in a position where, yeah, they're playing in the finals. Like, I just don't see that being the case. Obviously, Boston's going to take a step back this year. Indiana is going to take a step back this year. I think Detroit is probably going to be a team that's in a very similar position that they were in last year. Miami is probably going to be a play-in team again. Maybe they'll be at the bottom of the Eastern Conference playoff picture, like 5 or 6. But I look at this and say, is the East actually wide open? Or are there two pretty good teams, two pretty strong teams, not quite as good, and then a bunch of garbage? Kind of. I don't think that's wide open. I think there's actually a group of 2 teams that should be looked at as the favorites. There's another group of 2 teams that should be looked at as the dark horses. And then the other 11 teams in the conference, I look at and say, I would be stunned if any of you won the Eastern Conference and played in the finals this year. I just do not think, I don't buy into the thought process that the Eastern Conference is wide open. I think the top of the Eastern Conference is unproven, but I don't think that it's wide open. And we also don't know if Giannis is actually still going to be on the Bucks. Like, I still think that is not something that has yet been decided. We'll figure out. I mean, we will know obviously at a certain point, but I would not put that one to bed. I don't think that anything has been 100% decided. And if he's traded to another team in the Eastern Conference, maybe like Atlanta, who has, I think, still a pretty strong asset base or war chest, I guess you could say, that could make that type of move. Maybe that's a thing. But until that actually happens, I'm going to look at this and say, if anyone other than the Cavs or the Knicks won the Eastern Conference, I think that'd be a pretty surprising thing. Now, what's the Cavs culture like inside the locker room? And Could Al Horford be that 14th guy? We'll touch upon both those things next right here on Locked On Cavs. Today's show brought to you by 5 Hour Energy. It's time to fuel up and turn it up with 5 Hour Energy Transfusion. It brings the bold grape, ginger, and lime flavor, one of my favorite things, of your favorite golf drink, minus the alcohol, into a quick, energizing shot. Whether you're sinking birdies, like, I had one yesterday when I played, or just making memories with friends, this one's a hole-in-one for your energy game. Let's be honest, some days on the course or off the course, you just need that extra boost to stay sharp and energized. I know I wish I would have had this yesterday. I was on the golf course, played horribly, just struggled to hit the golf ball. And I didn't eat after I had breakfast, and then I didn't eat, and I teed off at 3:45. And you know what I really, really needed, but I didn't have one? A 5 Hour Energy. Having that boost, I think, probably would have salvaged my round, would have made my Sunday a lot better, because I probably would have played much better golf. And golf can be about a lot of things, good times with good people. For me, once in a while, it's about putting up a good score. Didn't do that yesterday, but 5 Hour Energy could have saved me, and I wish I would have had it. And the grape ginger lime flavor gives you the best parts of your clubhouse go-to without having to chase down the beverage cart. If you go to 5hourenergy.com today, that is the number 5hourenergy.com, you can use the promo code Locked On Golf. That is LOCKEDONGOLF to receive 20% off your order. This offer only valid until September 30th on one order and cannot be used with other promotions. This code is not good on subscription orders, and whether you're meeting up with friends or trying to turn 18 holes into 36, or just trying to have a better round the way that I was yesterday, get the energizing boost you need to power through. Order the transfusion flavored 5 Hour Energy shots today. Thank you again for making Locked On Cavs your first listen today and every day. And if you're watching the show on YouTube, like I said, do us a favor, hit that thumbs up button for us, click subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss anything from Locked On Cavs. And Mr. Cavs B-Ball asks, the Cavs have a really close locker room. Citing the Jarrett Allen wedding a couple of weeks ago. Congratulations to him again, as an example. But when it comes to winning culture, is there a world where being too close could be detrimental? I don't think so. And listen, I've not played professional sports, so I can't necessarily speak to that aspect of it. But I think so often you hear about teams that are close being the ones that are able to be a team that is greater than the sum of its parts, right? And I think that the Indiana Pacers last year are a good example of this, where that locker room seemed to be pretty tight-knit. Oklahoma City has been like this the last couple of years. I don't think that having a locker room that is close and that there's very little friction in should ever be looked at as anything other than a positive. And it's not to say that this team is perfect. That's not to say that, they should be looked at as the title favorites, because those things are just not true. But I do think that the fact that the culture inside the locker room seems to be very strong is something that is a positive for the Cavs. Now, if they need to go out there and do it on the floor, they need to perform on the floor. But I don't look at it and say, yeah, maybe if the Cavs had a little bit more edge in their locker room, they would be in a different spot. I look at this and say, it's hard to win in basketball. It's hard to win in any professional sport. When there is dysfunction in the locker room, it doesn't make winning impossible, but it makes winning much more difficult. There have been teams that have won championships that did not get along, but it was more difficult for them to win that championship by not getting along. There have been teams that have won championships that have been the best of friends, and I'm guessing it was a little bit easier for those teams when things got tough to be able to come together and make things happen. So I don't think that that is a real thing. And the last one for today, Jay asks, some are mentioning Al Horford as a potential fit for the Cavaliers. Is that possible as they're currently constructed? He'd be a serious help if it is. So Al Horford, the Cavs could theoretically sign Al Horford if Al Horford were willing to sign for the veteran minimum. Now, all indications are that Al Horford will be signing with the Golden State Warriors. However, the Warriors do have to figure out this Jonathan Kuminga situation. So that is why Al Horford is still sitting out there as a free agent in the NBA. Jonathan Kuminga, of course, is a restricted free agent right now for the Golden State Warriors. It seems as if he does not want to be back in Golden State. I cannot necessarily blame him. He would like to be signed and traded elsewhere, but the Warriors are, I think both sides are kind of playing hardball there. But that is the reason why Al Horford, to my knowledge, still is a free agent. He is going to be making more money this year from the Warriors than the Cavs can offer him. So theoretically, like, there is a mechanism where the Cavs could go out and sign Al Horford. They could bring him in if he's willing to be the 14th guy on the roster on a veteran minimum. But I look at that and say, yeah, that's not happening. Al Horford will be playing for the Golden State Warriors next year. And if he's not playing for the Golden State Warriors, I'd be very surprised to see him playing as a member of the Cleveland Cavaliers. But thank you for making today's edition of Locked On Cavs your first listen. Thank you for making it your first listen every single day. You can find the show anywhere you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, or anywhere else. Make sure to drop us a 5-star rating, leave us a nice review, and of course, be a friend. Tell a friend about Locked On Cavs. On tomorrow's show, planning to talk who could be that 14th guy. Maybe Al Horford will come back up. Kevin Love certainly will. Maybe Tristan Thompson wants to keep playing for the Cleveland Cavaliers. I don't know what direction that's going to go, but we are going to talk about that on tomorrow's edition of Locked On Cavs. Have a couple of guests lined up for later in the week as well. Planning on starting to do the Cavs Legendary Game Rewatch series next week. So if you've got suggestions for games that you want to hear talked about, whether it was the comeback against Boston this past year, LeBron James scoring 48 points against the Detroit Pistons in 2007, or, I do think the Cavs won a title almost 10 years ago, like with a really cool Game 7. If you want any of those games or any other ones talked about, you can comment below on YouTube, or you can email me at locavsmailbag@gmail.com, and we will try and get as many of those submissions in. But again, thank you for making today's show your first listen, and I will be back tomorrow talking more about the Cleveland Cavaliers.